Welcome back to the Poker Vlog. This episode number 221. For this one, we're on the Las Vegas Strip at Bellagio playing a big 5-10 game with straddles, double straddles, an opponent who's playing his cards blind, and perhaps one of the most interesting hands that I've ever played. So I'm very excited to share it with you guys. But before we get started, a couple of announcements to make. The first one is that I'm going out to the WPT at Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Tampa, Florida. I'll be there from August 29th through September 5th. We're doing a meetup game September 1st. And then from there, I'm going out to the Lodge to kick off the Fall Mayhem series. I'll be there from September 5th through the 13th, but we're doing a meetup game September 6th. So me, Doug, and Andrew will all be playing. We'll be doing a 1-2 game, and that should be a lot of fun. And then the last announcement is that I'm hosting a bounty event on clubwpt.com. If you use promo code BRAD22 when you sign up, you'll get a free month on there, and then you'll have a chance to win a $12,000 WPT World Championship passport if you win this bounty event. And if you knock me out, you get a $2,500 WPT Prime passport. So I have more information in the description box below, but be sure to take advantage of it because there's no cost to you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're on our way to Bellagio for an afternoon poker session. Occasionally, it's nice to be awake when other humans are. The game tends to be a little slower paced in the daytime than at night, but there's still plenty of money to be made. I buy into the 510 for 1500, that's the max. We take our seat in a must move and begin playing at 2:35 p.m. Very little happens until we pick up pocket fours at 455, we're in for 1800 by this point, and have 1700 in front of us. Under the gun limps in, the hijack calls, the cutoff raises to 50. I call, the big blind calls, under the gun calls, the hijack folds, we're going 4 ways to the flop out of position, it comes queen 4-3 rainbow, we've got middle set with multiple opponents, unfortunately, it checks through. The turn is the 5 of hearts, there's more and more to be worried about on this board, we can't allow it to check through again. I bet 130. The big blind and under the gun fold, our last hope is the initial pre-flop raiser in the cutoff. She calls. It's tough to put her on a hand after she checked back the flop, she may just have a draw. The river is the 9 of diamonds, it's about as blank as it gets on this board. My opponent is a solid player who doesn't bluff frequently. If she did bluff a lot, I might check to induce a bet from missed draws. Fairly often, I'll have missed draws, and I'll fire a big river bet with air. Here I make it 550 as a slight overbet to balance the times when I'm bluffing. If my opponent checks back a queen on the flop for pot control, or even if she has a hand like pocket jacks, she still might be able to find a call. The cutoff doesn't think it over for too long before folding. She likely didn't have much, perhaps she bricked a straight draw, heart draw, or both. With this win, we're up about 250 on the day. About a half hour later, we've got ace-deuce offsuit in the big blind. The button raises to 30. The small blind has something he wants to play with. He calls. In theory, ace-deuce offsuit is supposed to be a fold when the button raises and the small blind calls. The worst offsuit ace you're supposed to call with in this scenario is ace-4 offsuit. We're not too far from that, and we didn't come all this way to Bellagio to fold. I'd call for 20 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It's ace-6-3 with 2 hearts. We've got top pair and no kicker. The small blind leads for 40, putting us in an interesting spot. This is why you don't play ace-deuce offsuit. Not only do we have to be concerned that the small blind has us beat, but the pre-flop raiser on the button may have us beat as well. Still, we're not folding top pair yet. I call, hoping that we see a fold from the button. Luckily, the button lays down her hand. We're now heads up in position. The turn is another 6. This slows the small blind down. He checks. I want to take control of this pot. I make a small bet of 70. This accomplishes 2 things. First, it charges the small blind if he has a heart draw. Second, it allows us to check back the river if the small blind happens to have a better ace. Let's say the small blind has ace-10 for example, and the river is an offsuit 7. If we checked back turn, the small blind may realize that he has the best hand and could bet something like 80 or 100 on the river. I'd feel inclined to call, and I'd lose more than our $70 bet. The small blind calls, I still feel like he has hearts or a not so strong ace. The river is the king of diamonds. I'm happy to see it because it means that we no longer have to worry about our kicker not playing. If the opponent has an ace, we'll be chopping the majority of the time unless he has ace-6. I doubt he'd ever have ace-king though. The small blind puts out a blocker bet of 100. I strongly suspect that we'll both be playing aces and 6s with a king. I don't feel like calling to win half the pot. Since we bet turn, we can still have strong hands in our range like full houses and trip 6s. I raised to 350 in order to rep those. Now if the opponent has something like ace-10, he's in a very difficult spot. From our perspective, the worst case scenario is that he calls and we split the pot like we normally would have if we called anyway. The best case scenario is he folds a chop, so we win an extra couple hundred. The player folds somewhat quickly. Maybe he had a king-high flush draw and bet small on the river to get the showdown cheaply. Maybe our play worked to get the opponent off of an ace. Either way, we're up over 500. Another half hour goes by when we pick up Jack 10 offsuit in the small blind. A player in middle position raises to 30. He's someone that I've known for years who does a lot of unorthodox things when he gets bored, including open jamming for several hundred and sometimes blind. He recently tripled up after jamming for about 300 with pocket fours and got called by king queen and ace king. His opponents didn't make a pair, so he scooped. The middle position player is someone who I typically go out of my way for to get involved. The hijack calls the preflop raise, the button calls. Normally I'd fold Jack 10 offsuit in this situation. Here I call for 25 more. The big blind calls, we're going 5 ways to the flop. It's 10-6-6 with 2 hearts. We connect pretty well with this one. It checks through. Jack 10 might be winning at the moment. The turn is the 8 of diamonds. We've got to start betting before more scary cards come out like hearts, diamonds, a 9, or any overcards. I make it 70. Taking down the pot with this bet would be a good result. The big blind folds, the initial preflop raiser calls. The hijack calls, the button folds, it's down to 3 players. The river is the 8 of spades. If my opponent had draws on the turn, they missed. If they had something like 9-8 or 8-7, they just made a full house though. I check for pot control purposes and to potentially induce a bluff from the middle position player. He comes through with a bet of 160. This is the wild guy. I'm not putting much stock into his bet. I'm more concerned about the hijack. If the hijack calls, I'll get out of the hand. Instead, the hijack folds. Easy decision for me against the other opponent. I call. We don't have the winner.
Nice hand.
The opponent makes runner full house with ace-8 offsuit. I expanded the preflop calling range and got punished for it. There's no right way to play jiggity-tiggity. I'm down a little for the day when we're dealt pocket 10s. It's my first hand at a new table. I switched to hang out with my friend Kevin, who's on my right. He raises from under the gun to 30. He'll be playing a tight range. If we were both in later position, I'd 3-bet at a high frequency. When he's first to act and I'm second to act, I'll be calling most of the time, which is what I do here. The big blind calls, we're going 3 ways to the flop in position. It's 10-5-3 with 2 diamonds. We've got top set. The big blind checks. Kevin makes slightly more than a pot-sized bet of 100. Wow. We've got position on him and don't want to scare him off. I call, even though there are plenty of bad cards that could come out on future streets. The big blind looks like he wants to do something crazy. His name is Ryan. I've never played with him before. Ultimately, he just flats. We're all still in it. The turn is the 9 of diamonds. I don't like seeing the flush draw get there, especially because most of the 10s are accounted for and we have 2 opponents. If we had bottom set, another diamond would be less worrisome because it'd be a lot more likely that one or both opponents could have top pair. The big blind checks. Under the gun checks. I doubt I have to worry about under the gun having a flush because he would have continued betting for value rather than potentially let it check through with 2 opponents. I don't want this board to get any worse. I bet 240 so that no one gets a free river card in the instances when we are ahead. If we get check raised by a flush, we still have full house outs as well. The big blind folds. He's the one that I was most concerned about. My friend Kevin also folds. I show him that he made a good laydown. I'm a little surprised to hear when he tells me exactly how good it was though.
Did you? Nice laydown.
With several dynamics at play, Kevin is smart enough to know that I'll almost never be bluffing when the flush draw gets there on the turn. After he makes a pot-sized bet on the flop, I call and the big blind calls. The fact that we're both in early position decreases the chances even more so. We're back to being up a little when we're dealt ace-10 of hearts on the button. Ryan raises to 30 for middle position. 3-betting and calling are reasonable options. I call. The big blind calls. We're going 3 ways to the flop. The dealer puts out Jack 8-7 with 2 spades and a heart. We've got a gutter with 1 over and a backdoor flush draw. The big blind checks. The middle position player bets 90. I currently have ace high, but I have removal to plenty of big hands like 10-9, aces, ace-jack, and jack-10. Most of those holdings would be in my preflop calling range. I raised to 270 in order to rep some of those. This should get the big blind to fold pretty much any one pair hand. If I get called, there are lots of cards that can help us improve. What I didn't expect is the big blind to cold 3-bet to 700. He has to have a set almost at minimum to make this move. I seem to have walked right into a beehive. The middle position player now 4 bets to 1400. My decision's easy. I fold. The big blind snap calls. He's all in for 1300. I'm eager to see what both players have, expecting to see a straight versus top set situation. They agree to run it twice. The first turn is the jack of spades. Ryan's happy as he improves. The river is the deuce of diamonds, that's a blank. Ryan's confident that he has the first board, so maybe he has pocket jacks for quads. The second turn is the king of spades. No one says anything to indicate if they've improved. The final river is the jack of clubs. Ryan definitely doesn't have pocket jacks, or we need to call the floor over. No need for that. Ryan shows that he has jack 8 offsuit. He flopped top 2 pair, then made a full house on both runouts. It's especially gross because the big blind has 10-9 offsuit for a flopped straight. Ryan only had 4 outs total and somehow manages to hit half of them to win both runouts and scoop a $3,000 pot. If I were Ryan, I probably would have folded to the 3-bet. Instead, he put in a 4th bet and got rewarded by the deck. It's been a back and forth day for us. We look down at ace-deuce of clubs and are currently slightly stuck after trying to bluff into the nuts and a future full house. We're in the cutoff and Ryan's put the double straddle on to 40. I raised to 100. The player who just got stacked with the flopped straight has rebought, got a quick double up, and is currently in the small blind. He 3-bets to 340. There's 5-10 in the pot. I'm getting over 2-1 in position with a suited ace. We're in another one of these spots in which I should typically be folding ace-deuce, but ace-3 and ace-4 suited are going to be calls against a small blind 3-bet. The opponent's sizing is a lot less than 4x here too, so I can justify expanding since I'm getting a better price. I call for 240 more. We're heads up in position in what's already a big pot. The flop comes jack 6-4 with 2 clubs. We've got a draw to the nuts with 1 over and a backdoor straight draw as well. The small blind down bets at 240. I've got 1190 total in my stack, and there's 990 in the pot at the moment. If I call, the pot will be 1230 and I'll have 950 left. I'm getting a good price on a call. The problem is that if I call here, we brick turn and the opponent shoves, I'm gonna have to fold. I really like realizing my equity, so I don't like folding much, especially when I have a draw to the nuts. I also really like winning hands without making a pair. The idea comes into my head to rip it in as a semi-bluff. I can likely get all better ace-high hands to fold, maybe something like 10s and 9s as well. There aren't any hands that would be really a disaster for us to be up against if the opponent calls. Even if the small blind has pocket kings, we'll still have a 46% chance of winning. I'm in the gambling mood. Let's do this. That's right, we're all in and there's no snap call, despite the opponent getting about 2.3 to 1 pot odds. A fold would be a huge victory for us. The opponent only needs to have 30% equity to break even by calling. It's hard to imagine he doesn't have at least that with anything that he would have 3-bet us with pre-flop, followed by a c-bet. We're definitely not up against an overpair, likely not even up against a jack. After 30 seconds, the opponent folds. We win a fairly large pot with no pair. Part of me wishes that we would have gotten called because I've got a feeling that we were going to get there. A bigger part of me that is rational is happy that the opponent laid his hand down. We're up a few hundred on the session. A while passes before we're dealt ace-6 offsuit in the big blind. The cutoff raises to 30. This is Ryan who won the huge pot after they ran it twice with jack 8 offsuit. I have him labeled as a wild player in my mind and I don't even realize how wild he actually is yet. I call for 20 more. We're heads up out of position. The flop comes jack 6-4 rainbow. We've got middle pair. I check. The cutoff doesn't miss many opportunities to bet. Here he makes it 40. I'm not planning on folding a pair to him, especially this early in a hand. I call to see what develops on the turn. The dealer puts out the 8 of hearts, no real help to us. I check. Ryan isn't letting up. He keeps the pressure on with a bet of 110. I still don't believe him. With maniacs, you have to call him light, even sometimes when it's difficult, and you only have third pair. I call once more. The river is another jack. I'm glad because it's less likely that we were up against a pair of jacks on the flop, and if the cutoff has an overpair, a second jack on the board should slow him down. I check. This is when we get a glimpse of how much of a maniac Ryan actually is.
Let me look. King out.
Wow. The opponent bet flop and turn with just king high, and did he say he didn't look before the river? What's going on in this game?
Always should look before I bet turn.
You didn't look at your cards at all?
No.
He never does. He never
Makes it more fun.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's how you do things.
Okay, it's confirmed. The opponent is playing hands blind, at least occasionally. I need to be on the lookout for that. 2 hands later, we're on the button with ace-jack suited. Ryan is in the hijack. He raises to 40 and makes a point to say that he actually did look this time. To me, this is a pretty big verbal tell. He's trying to indicate that he saw what he had, and it's strong. When people are attempting to convey strength, it's usually because they're trying to dissuade you from taking aggressive lines against them. When that's the case, do your best to disappoint him. The cutoff calls the 40. We have a hand that we're supposed to be 3-bet squeezing with anyway, but I feel even better doing it given what the opponent has said. I re-raised to 160. What I don't particularly want to see is a 4-bet from Ryan. I still don't 100% believe that he has anything super strong. He's trying to tell a different story though. He tosses out a grape chip and 4-bets to 540. The cutoff folds quickly to get out of the way. Ryan wants to make it very clear that this isn't one of the hands that he's playing blind. Again, he says,
I did look this time, though.
He's reinforcing the fact that he has something strong. I'm not buying it. The really tough thing to do from this point is to put my money where my mouth is. In equilibrium, you're supposed to call the 4-bet in position, but I'm pretty sure that I have the best hand at the moment, and there will be a lot of flops that I won't like. I have removal to big hands like aces and ace-king. Getting it all in now, while my gut is telling me to, seems like the best option. I only had 2,200 to start the hand. I go with my read to see if the opponent wants to play for all of it.
All in.
God, how much was it?
2,200?
Oh, man.
That's a relief to get that reaction when we 5-bet shove. Ryan is deep in the tank. He's trying to figure out how much he'll be stuck if he calls and loses. He says that he's flipping it best, so maybe he has a small pocket pair.
Back stuck 12. Oh man, I want to gamble so bad.
During interviews for jobs at Google, they used to ask potential hires, if you were shrunk down to the size of a nickel and were put in a blender, what would you do? The best answer is to say that your strength to weight ratio would exponentially increase and you could easily jump out. The problem for Ryan is that he's a full-size human who's currently in a blender, and it's a big blender. He's not able to jump out of this one. Nearly a minute and a half goes by before the opponent finally folds.
Alright, so we got that one through.
You're ahead.
Was I?
You're slightly ahead.
Okay, that's good.
Like very king queen suited.
I didn't want to call, and I didn't want to fold, and I didn't want to jam. I hated all my options.
We're up 600 without seeing a flop after getting Ryan to fold what he says was king-queen suited. I'm happy with the outcome. We're up $1,000 now. It's time for a $30 PLO double board bomb pot. We're under the gun with aces and sixes, plus we've got hearts. It's a beautiful hand. The winner of this pot will pay time for everyone at the table. We're going 7 ways to the flop. The first one is Jack 8-6 with 2 hearts. We flop bottom set and have the nut flush draw. The second flop is King 9-8 rainbow. We don't improve there, we just have our overpair. Small blind, big blind check. We're betting for value. We make it 100. That's evidently not an acceptable amount for the player on our left. He wants to make it more. The middle position player puts in the raise to 400. These PLO double board bomb pots can get big quickly. It folds back to us. We've got a strong hand on one board and a low to medium strength hand on the other. I call to see if we can improve, then maybe we can start piling money in. The top turn is the queen of diamonds. Jack 10 now makes it straight. The bottom turn is the 3 of clubs. It's most likely a blank, though you never really know in these hands. I check. The opponent has 1,500 total in his stack. He announces that he's making a pot size bet of 1,010. It's a pretty gross spot. I'm in terrible shape. If I'm up against something like King 10-9, it's just super rare that I'll be up against the nuts on both boards. I'll often be good on at least one board. In worst case scenario, if I am up against the nuts on both boards, I'll at least have some outs to potentially scoop the entire pot. I could also be up against plenty of worse hands and be in great shape. I don't see how I can fold here. I'm also not going to call for 1,010 and fold to a $500 jam on the river. I announce that I'm all in for 1,500 effective. The opponent snap calls. This isn't good. I show what we've got. The player shows that he's got the nuts on one board with 10-9, followed by the nuts on the other board with a set of kings. This is about as bad as it gets. At least we still have plenty of outs on the top board. We can hit hearts, or the board can pair to give us a full house so that we can maybe win half the pot. We're drawing almost stone dead on the bottom board. It's a little bit hopeless unless we can somehow drill an ace. Brace yourselves.
Share the board. That's good.
Super nutty.
It's very good.
Wow. Oh my god.
It'd be so sick if someone had kings and 9-10.
Oh my god.
Wow, you had king suit?
She scooped you.
I scooped. I have full
You
house,
picked a miracle man.
full house, and
Oh
then
my god. That's insane.
wow. Thanks, man. That is the most insane.
Double board kill is insane.
That was the worst 2 rivers of all time.
I mean, he's drawn to 2 outs here.
He's drawn to 2 outs on both boards.
Well, he has a lot
Great.
of carry.
Oh.
I have them covered. Yeah.
That's close to the luckiest that I've ever been in a big pot like that. We get the board to pair on the top board, in addition to drilling the miracle 2-outer on the bottom board to set over set the opponent and scoop an enormous pot. To be fair, he got pretty lucky to drill one of only 7 outs on the top turn for the nuts there before we resucked out. I have to give the opponent credit though, he took the bad beat extremely well. His name is Tom. I noticed earlier that he's a vlogger and I talked to him a little bit about that. Perhaps him losing this pot in such a rough way will benefit him in the long run. Be sure to check out his poker channel, which is called
Lifestyle Poker.
Very Fitting. I'll have a link down below in the description box to his vlog. I've never won a hand like that before, but I'll definitely take it. We're currently at 3,000 on the session. We've got a great opportunity to build on that since one of the opponents is playing blind. Over an hour goes by before we pick up ace-queen suited in the small blind. It's been a frustrating hour because everyone has been straddling or double straddling, and I apparently used up all my run good for the day, as I've been losing $50 to $150 at a time by calling pre-flop raises and mostly bricking flops. Maybe that'll change this hand, which also has a straddle on for 20. Ryan has run up a massive stack of about 8,500, partly by calling a 3-bet with 8-3 of diamonds and making 2-pair on the river to stack my friend. Maniacs are extremely dangerous when they're running good. Ryan raises to 50 from the hijack. I was watching him closely to see if he had looked at his cards before raising or not, and he definitely didn't. The cutoff is a competent player. He probably also knows that the hijack opened blind. The cutoff 3-bets to 170. Our hand is too good to fold. Everyone is really deep who's involved so far, and that kind of makes the situation a little scarier. I cold 4-bet to 600, despite being worried that someone is going to 5-bet me. Ryan pretty much has no choice but to actually look at his cards for the first time. He takes a gander, yet he doesn't fold immediately. He's got some devious thoughts running through his mind. It takes him almost a full minute to fold what probably would have taken me half a second to let go of. We're still not out of the woods. The cutoff has already had a long time to think about what he wants to do. He isn't quite ready to fold though. It looks like he might be considering jamming for 3,000 total. I'd lean towards folding if he does, but in this game, ace-queen suited could be way good. I'd have to at least consider calling. The dynamics really get interesting when there are straddles on and a person is raising blind nearly every hand. Ultimately, the cutoff folds as well. That pot wasn't that large, but it's intense and stressful when you cold 4-bet like that. You have to worry about 2 players potentially 5-betting you. Another hour goes by and I'm getting little to work with. We've got ace-8 offsuit on the button and another straddle pot. The stack has continuously been dwindling. It's even more frustrating because I haven't been able to capitalize on Ryan playing blind for a long time. If anything, it's caused me to lose more money. He keeps raising, all of hands that should be ahead of him, but they don't hit. He bets, and when I'm not able to make a pair against him, it can become costly. Here he raises again to 50 from middle position. I've got a better than average hand. It's one that I would typically fold to a raise, but when the person raising may not have looked and we're in position, it's probably okay. I would 3-bet to isolate him. I just don't want the opponent to 4-bet me like he did in the ace-jack suited hand. I call. I have a question for Ryan before we get started.
Did you look at Ryan?
I just looked now.
Ryan confirms that he looked only after he raised pre-flop. The flop comes 10-7-5 rainbow. We once again don't make a pair. As expected, we're going to see a c-bet. Ryan makes it 40. Ace high could be good. If not, we've got a lot of cards that'll give us a straight draw on the turn. If we make a pair, there's a good chance we'll be best as well. I call 40, not wanting this pot to get too big. The turn is the 8 of spades, giving us second pair. Ryan is going to continue firing. He increases the bet to 170. I'm not too concerned that we're beat right now. We're playing against 2 somewhat random cards. Second pair is above average. I call with plans to call again on most rivers. The dealer puts out the jack of diamonds. There are 4 to the straight, and there's another overcard out there. The opponent winds up, then bets 800. It's a very big overbet. He's done similar things in hands with other people before showing down the winner. He hasn't really messed with me like this too much since I 5-bet shoved the ace-jack a few hours earlier. I also called him somewhat light for 2 streets in the ace-6 hand. He gave up on the river against me. He clearly isn't giving up here. There will hopefully be better opportunities for me to catch him if he indeed is bluffing. I fold. I reach to turn the camera off, and as I'm doing so, Ryan shows that he has king-6 offsuit for no pair. We would have won if we called. For those of you thinking that I needed to call, we play almost the exact same hand a little later with 4 to the straight on board. I had a pair of aces and folded. On the other hand, Ryan shows that he had a king for a straight. It's frustrating when you can't beat a guy who's playing blind against you, and he's either getting there or putting you in very tough spots given what you have. Over 9 hours into the session, we've got king-10 offsuit in the hijack. Ryan straddled from under the gun. I'd like to play a pot against him one more time in position with an above average hand. I raised to 50. Rather than call, Ryan gets creative with a 3-bet to 150. I'm not sure if he's looked. I suspect that he hasn't. I've got a hand that I ordinarily wouldn't open with from this position and certainly wouldn't call a 3-bet with, but at some point, I'll make something relatively strong against this guy, and if I can catch him betting 2x pot on the river as a bluff, it'll all be worth it. I call for 100 more, we're heads up. The flop comes 8-7-5 rainbow. I just never flop anything against him. Ryan says that he's going to look at his cards for the first time at this point. He must not hate him, or maybe he does, who really knows. He bets 170. It's another situation in which I barely have anything. King high could be good though, and a lot of cards will give us a straight draw on the turn if we don't make a pair. I call, the dealer puts out the 5 of diamonds, we don't improve. The opponent may be getting concerned, he checks. There's a better chance that king high is best now. I'm worried that if I check, that's going to give away the strength of our hand, then Ryan can blast away on the river, and I'll likely have to fold again if we don't make a pair. I don't want that to happen. I bet 250 to sort of try and freeze him. If he calls and we don't hit a king or a 10 on the river, we'll probably check back hoping the king high is good. We don't get the opportunity. Ryan puts in the check raise to 770. Damn it, this is pretty annoying. I have no clue whether or not we've got the best hand. I don't see how I can call here though. I'm regretting the $250 bet. I've got no plan for the river if I call and don't improve. I'm flustered and I fold. To make matters worse, Ryan shows for the vlog that he wrecked my world with 6-deuce offsuit. He had an open-ended straight draw and 2 live cards, but we were ahead. I can no longer beat the guy.
Yeah, sounds about right.
I've been playing all day and I'm tired. We're way down from the high point, but still have a 4-figure win. Time to go home. Crazy session today. I was in for 1800. I played 9.5 hours. The game was amazing. I got super lucky on both river cards for that PLO double board bomb pot, and then I was up 3,000 at the high point. I ended up losing 1,800 of it back to a guy who wasn't looking at his cards pre-flop, and he just wrecked my world over and over again, bluffing me on rivers or in a bunch of spots. He just had like nothing, and I couldn't really defend against him. I never really had very strong hands. I was kind of waiting for spots to make big hands and waiting for him to punt to me, but it ended up working out really well for him. I never had anything that I could call him with, so he got me good on a number of occasions. So that was unfortunate for me, and the game was great, but mental state after losing every hand, or at least every significant hand, to Ryan for the last couple hours, felt like it was just best to get out of there, get some sleep, and just book a solid win. You know, I mean, $1,200 is great. It's too bad I wasn't able to win any more big pots, but I'll take a $1,200 win any day of the week. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons, because it helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. This was just a wild session with, someone who's playing blind and wasn't really able to take advantage of the situation. I started going out of my way to play pots with them, and that backfired as it usually does. I was up 3,000 at the high point. I ended up losing 1,800 of that back, so I only booked a $1,200 win, which is still great, but it just kind of feels a little bit like a loss when you've backtracked that much at the end of the session. Anyway, be sure to come out to Tampa. Hopefully, I'll see you at the meetup game there, and or at the lodge, and also on clubwpt.com if you use the bonus code BRAD22. Anyway, I have more information for all that stuff in the description box below. Hope you're all doing well. Stay safe. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you next time.